How have the new Flames fit in so far, and does Craig Conroy have more trades up his sleeve? Hey everyone, welcome to Hot Topics. This episode brought to you by ProStars Plumbing and Heating, Calgary's first choice when it comes to plumbing and heating. Rob Wong joined alongside by Postmedia Calgary Flames writers Wes Gilbertson and Danny Austin. You guys, Fridays seem to be the best days for NHL teams to make trades. We saw the Flames land Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost from the Flyers in exchange for Andrei Kuzmenko, Jacob Pelche, and a pair of picks. 3 games each for the new guys so far. Wes, how do you think they've looked and will fit into this lineup?
Well, Rob, not to tip off our audience that you're based in Toronto, but they did get it under the wire for a Thursday trade, 10:40 p.m. Mountain Time. You know what? I can't even imagine how challenging it was for those guys to play a back-to-back with the Flyers, come out, play a back-to-back with the Flames. And I think early returns are pretty impressive. You know, there's been flashes certainly of the skill set that Morgan Frost provides. He's a guy that has some offensive ability and some confidence with the puck that the Flames don't have a ton of. And so that kind of jumps right away. He scored his first goal as a Flame in Seattle, and you know, a beauty move and then a laser of a shot from up high. And so you can see that. And then you can see the sort of grime and skill combo that Joel Farabee plays with. He's already sort of perfecting the drive by the net, looking for a tip or a rebound when Nazem Kadri, who's been on his line, is shooting. He brings some sandpaper. He'd have 2 goals if not for those pesky reviews. Instead, he's got just 1. But early returns, I think, from Thursday's trade have been very positive. I think, you know, if you're Flames management or a Flames teammate or a Flames fan, you're pretty impressed with what you've seen from the new guys.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with Wes more. Trying to figure out a new and insightful angle on this one. I agree. I think it's been positive. I mean, I don't think that you're expecting these guys to come in and be the number 1 and number 2 offensive drivers on the team. Frankly, I think Farabee should have had 2 goals against the Leafs. I felt like that was one of those coaches' reviews where you just wonder maybe if we need to change the goaltender interference rule, because I barely saw any contact. And if that's goalie interference, then the hockey game that we all grew up playing is not the one that they were playing in the league. The Leafs should have been down 1-0 at that point for sure. Look, I think these guys are pieces who are meant to come in and complement, you know, some of the star players. You're not expecting Joel Farabee to be the creator on a line with Jonathan Huberdeau and Nazem Kadri. But he went to the net. He did score against the Leafs. And yeah, with Frost, I'm very curious. I do not watch every Philadelphia Flyers game. So I know that Flyers fans really liked him and that there were some struggles with consistency. So the early returns have been good. And what you want to see is him doing it night in and night out. But as Wes said, the early returns are good, and Farabee should have 2 goals.
So it's interesting. You look at the trade deadline last year, Danny, and the Flames were looking further down with regards to futures, maybe getting some players that weren't as NHL ready. But they pick up a couple of players here who are definitely, you know, fits into an NHL roster, can play right now. Do you think that this move maybe signals something as far as what GM Craig Conroy may potentially do as we get closer to the trade deadline?
I mean, for me, it signals that he is staying the course. He got 2 guys. I mean, Frost is 25, Farabee's 24. I hope I don't have that flipped. But these are guys who, if all goes well, they should be with the Flames for a number of years, and their best years are ahead of them, and that's what he wants. Yeah, he had to give up Jacob Peltier, but Jacob Peltier is only a year younger than those guys. So if you actually add up the combined age of the 2 packages, Kuzmenko and Peltier are actually older combined than Frost and Farabee. So no, I don't. I think it is imperative that this Flames team not leverage its future for the right now, just because they're in a playoff position. The reality is they are tied on points with the Vancouver Canucks. There's a very good chance that this team does not make the playoffs, but I think that this was a nice little reward for the work that the guys on the roster have done, you know, surpassing the odds. And I'm not entirely sure that the deal is going to be there, that the Flames fans might want. That young stud number 1 guy who's going to sort of, you know, be the face of the franchise moving forward. If that guy's there, then I guess you might pull the trigger. But other than that, I think that we've seen the big move.
What this tells us is that they're trying to thread the needle between continuing that build for the future and remaining relevant in that wild card race. I mean, they are in a playoff position this morning. They want to reward their players with saying, hey, you know, we're going to bring in some pieces as opposed to subtract some pieces. Like, we're going to do what we can to help you guys, but we're not going all in. It's not chips all in the middle of the table for this season. And the one thing I think that maybe says more to me than the trade even did was what we keep hearing around the Saddle Dome, and we heard from Elliot Friedman on Hockey Night in Canada, that they're not planning to move Nazem Kadri or Rasmus Anderson or Mackenzie Weegar this season. That tells me that, while those might be coveted pieces elsewhere, the Flames want to see what this current group can do. Just don't expect them to add a bunch of 35-year-olds for a playoff push. They're going to continue to put an emphasis on getting guys like a 25-year-old Frost and a 24-year-old Farabee, as opposed to those sort of rental pieces that the top contenders are going to be looking for.
Well, of course, there are a lot of rumors out there. The Flames kicking tires potentially on a guy like Dylan Cousins, who would fit that mold from the Buffalo Sabres, of course. When you look at the young guys on this roster, Connor Zary was such a big part of the early season returns, Wes, and unfortunately suffered that injury, is working his way back now. He's been on the ice for a little bit here. Still no exact timeline for his return, but when he ultimately does come back, where do you think he fits now with guys like Farabee and Frost in the mix here?
Well, I think probably the first thing that jumps out for me is that he probably fits again as a winger. Morgan Frost is a natural center. He's a guy who has, better face-off stats than anyone on Calgary's current roster. And so I think with him joining Kadri and Backlund, now you have your top three centers, which gives you an opportunity to float Connor Zary back over to the wing. And that's where he's had his most success as an NHLer. I actually think people are already sort of daydreaming about what he and Morgan Frost can do together. They play very similar games. Like, they're both very confident with the puck. They're both willing to attack in one-on-one situations. They're both guys who can get the defense on its heels a little bit, because you never know what's coming. And I think if you throw those two guys and maybe Yegor Sharangovich on a line, I think that's an intriguing possibility. I don't know how soon we'll see it. Connor Zary is just back skating and in a very limited capacity as he recovers from a knee injury. But that's where I sort of see him. And what that would do, one of the big topics in Calgary these days is the sort of inability to trust the fourth line and not getting enough out of the fourth line. And that gives you, if you're healthy at that point, an option of putting Martin Pospisil a little further down the lineup and maybe putting some more of that sandpaper that fourth line seems to be missing, or some of that speed that seems to be missing, just giving that group a boost that way.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, because I think Wes did a really good job summarizing it. The thing with Connor Zary is you could tell me that he was going to play on any of their first three lines. I like many fans, am excited by that sort of Frost Zary combination. I think both of them are creators on some level, and I think that could be really fun. But if you told me that Zary was going to end up with Kadri, sounds okay to me. If you're going to tell me that he was going to end up with Backlund, that works too. So I do think he, for arguably the first time this season, I mean, I think that when he gets back, it'll feel like the Flames have a little bit more flexibility with what they can do with that top nine. And I think that's going to be super encouraging. He's not going to be back before Saturday. But I do think the Four Nations comes at a nice time for this group. Rasmus Anderson is currently the only one who's scheduled to be there. And I think there are a lot of guys who, we're not mentioning here, but have some bumps and bruises and could sure use a week in the sun in Mexico recovering. And Zary is obviously top of that list, but there's a lot of others too.
Who couldn't use a week in Mexico?
I know. Why am I not going to Mexico?
Yeah, I think we all could at this point of the winter, unfortunately. But also, we'll be interested to see here what the Flames do coming out of that break. Of course, hanging on to this second wild card spot. As always, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. For Wes Gilbertson and Danny Austin, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.